This Beautiful Fantastic is a British film directed by Simon Aboud and stars Jessica Brown-Findlay, Andrew Scott, and Tom Wilkinson. The movie follows a young woman named Bella Brown who dreams of becoming a children's book author. The first scene of the film sets up Bella's character and her relationship with her garden. The movie opens to Bella and her story being told by a narrator. He explains how Bella was left in a box by the river as a baby and had been kept alive and warm by the ducks until she had finally been found by an old gentleman he had described as an ancient lunatic who enjoyed hypothermia. He had gone for a swim and found her. He had taken her to the orphanage and she ended up being raised in a convent. As she grew up, she found out that she was different pretty quickly. From birth, she had been afraid of plants. We see her cry anytime she has passed under any vegetation. She also found out that she had OCD, obsessive-compulsive disorder, as she is always rearranging everything. She is seen arranging candles in a convent. We are also shown her home and how everything is placed in specific order, from being color-coded and also being arranged by order of size and heights. She even arranges her food in specific order and eats at exact times of the day, no sooner or later. Even her trash is arranged and her toothbrush is in the order of the days. As an adult, Bella works in a library and struggles to be on time to work because of her condition. And because of this, she gets into trouble with her boss a lot. She is shown leaving her home. Before leaving, she tells herself in the mirror that day that she is going to make a difference. After she had gotten the job in the library, she had been given strict rules of when to arrive, how long her lunch break was, and how many tea breaks she was entitled to every workday. While she worked at the library, she was also working on a children's book she planned on publishing as she was an aspiring children's author. Billy, who was a young inventor, frequented the library a lot, and most of the time, was a nuisance. He was always either talking too loudly or eating, which was also prohibited in the library. Billy had caught Bella's eye, though. While she tended to her section in the library, she spied on Billy as she worked. She sees him get scolded for eating in the library. He blows an egg from its shell and sprinkles some salt on it. This fascinates Bella. It doesn't take long after the librarian leaves him that he brings out the egg and continues eating it. The library is announced to be closing and for everyone to make their way to the exit. Bella finds a piece of paper left behind by Billy and takes it home, curious to see what was etched on it. She uses her pencils to make out the etching and finds out it is a drawing of a bird. The paper eventually gets blown out of the window by the wind. There is a heavy storm that night, and the paper is blown to the top of a tree. So, despite her fear, Bella comes out of her house all covered up. She has a flashlight in hand, trying to find the paper. She finds it on the tree, and as she is about to get the paper, she slips and falls, passing out. She wakes up and finds herself in her neighbor's apartment. Her neighbor is a reclusive and angry old man named Alfie. She is tended to by Alfie's doctor Millie as she had hit her head pretty hard and lost consciousness. While she is tended to, Alfie tells her that her garden is in such a horrible state. He calls her a horticulture and says her garden fought back, which is why she is wounded. He tells her it is not only horrible but an eyesore. The doctor tells him to leave her alone as she is still unwell, but Alfie continues to nag. Vernon is asked to bring her tea, and while they wait, Alfie asks her what she does when she is not murdering plants. She says she works at the library, but really, she's a writer. Then Alfie says her work must keep her from the garden. As she tells him she is sorry for the inconvenience, but he is not taking it. Soon enough, they are joined by Vernon, who is the person who takes care of Alfie. He brings them tea. He then says he doesn't like the way Alfie speaks and that if he wasn't so sick, he would have quit. Alfie makes fun of him that he is only brave when there is an audience. He tells Alfie he wants to leave that very moment, but Alfie tells him he has to tend to the dirty floor before he leaves. He also tells him he has the unwanted guest to thank for the extra work, referring to Bella. He tells him he needs to go pick up his kids, but eventually begins to do the work. Bella eventually tells him to leave it and that she was going to handle it while he went to tend to his kids. He insists on doing it himself, but Alfie tells him to be grateful and leave. When he is about to go, he tells Alfie that slavery has been abolished in the country already, and Alfie crudely answers by saying the country is worse off for it. The next day, while Bella is sleeping, she hears a knock on her door. It's Vernon and his kids. He had come to say thank you to her for helping him out yesterday. She is surprised to see him with his kids as she did not invite him over. To say thank you, he decides he wants to make breakfast for her while he waits for the bus to come get his kids. She asks him why he doesn't leave them with their mother, and he explains that their mother is late and he feels sorry for that and apologizes. He continues making breakfast, and her normally perfect home is turned upside down by Vernon and his kids. She is livid and her OCD is acting up. She is used to eating at very precise timing and having everything exactly where she leaves it. But she says nothing and just endures it until the kids leave, after Vernon serves her breakfast. She tells him that Alfie is a bully. She doesn't know why he puts up with it. As they talk about Alfie, they see him in the garden. He is taking notes in the garden. When they come out to meet him and ask him what he is doing, he tells her she might have won the heart of Vernon, but he can't forgive what she has done to the garden. He says she has to be taught a lesson. Vernon, on the other hand, is late for work, though he denies it and says he is not. But Alfie waits for a while as he watches his wristwatch. Then, he finally says Vernon is late, and since he can't tolerate tardiness, he won't be paying him for that day. As Vernon argues with him, he tells him that he is fired. End of story. Then Vernon says he can't fire him as he has been working for him for 5 years, and according to the law, he has to give him at least 5 months' notice before terminating his employment. Then Bella says Vernon can come work for her if he wants, which he agrees to and says he does want to work for her. Then he says since he works for Bella now, Alfie is trespassing on her property, and he should leave. When they get back in, Bella tells Vernon she might have been a little too hasty, as she doesn't know how she will pay him. But he says it's not a problem, as Alfie was legally bonded to still keep paying him until after 5 months. He hastily asks Bella if she has a cleaner, and she answers that she is the only one that does the cleaning. Then he says there's normal cleaning, and then there's real cleaning. There are things only a professional can spot. She remembers she is supposed to go to work and says she can't be late and immediately leaves. She gets to work at exactly 9 a.m., right on time. It doesn't take long before Billy walks into the library too and asks her for directions to a book, which she gives him. While she is working, Billy strikes a conversation with her, but as she talks, her boss reminds her that she needs to go to her section. She gets back home to have dinner prepared by Vernon. He asks her how the food is, and she tells him it is great, before asking him where he had learned to cook like that. Instead of answering her question, he tells her he has something to tell her. He had accidentally mixed in a red item of clothing with the whites and it had turned them pink. She is livid, but she tells him it's okay regardless. As soon as he leaves, she gets a phone call which she picks up. It turns out that is livid Alfie, who refers to himself as her nemesis. He demands that she gives him back his cook. He barely lets her talk before he drops the call and leaves her hanging. The next morning, she gets a visit from the landlord. He tells her that he received a complaint about her, and she wonders who it is from, although she has her suspicions. He tells her it is about her and the garden, noting that it is in worse shape than he even imagined. He reminds her that she is bound by her contract to keep the house, which includes the garden, in perfect shape, and nothing less. She tells him she is afraid of floral, and because of that, she avoids it, but she also promises him she can fix it. He tells her it is too late, and that she is expected to move out at the end of the month, but Vernon arrives and defends her. He tells the landlord that, by law, he is supposed to inform her before he comes around, and that he was in breach of the law, and that he is supposed to schedule a meeting by at least 1 month before he makes a visit. He finally agrees and says she has to fix the garden in 1 month, or else she will be evicted. They get back inside, and Bella is worried. She tells Vernon she is hardly a writer, and now, she is expected to be a gardener too. At the end of the month, she will be evicted, and he will be out of a job, and it's all her fault. Vernon asks her to stand up as she is ranting and suddenly gives her a hug. She is caught off guard, but she immediately calms down. She admits that it has been a while since she was hugged.
Oh, I've heard every tale, every love song out there about the birds and the bees. Oh, could it happen to someone like me? All the stories are say it happens, you don't have to look.
In the next scene, we see Bella dressed in a beekeeping garment, as she goes into the garden with a pair of scissors. She begins to snip at the trees and shrubs. Soon enough, she goes to the garden shed and tries to use the weed whacker. This disturbs Alfie, who is listening to music. He comes out and meets Bella lying on the fall next to some cut plants in the weed whacker. He tells her about the plants she just cut up, and says they were probably the last living things in the garden, but she cut them to pieces. She tells him that she was only trying to tidy up a bit. Then he tells her to give him back his cook, and Bella tells him that he should have thought of the fact that he needed him, before he had treated Vernon so badly. She turns on the weed whacker and begins to walk away from him. While he tells her to give him his cook back, she says she can't hear him. Vernon comes to the garden with food for her. She tells him he can come help, but he says he is no good with plants. Later in the day, after Bella gets tired of the garden, she leaves it and goes into the house. It's not long before she gets called by Alfie, who begins to emotionally blackmail her. She tells her that he is a dying man and that, unlike her, time was his enemy. He then tells her he has no family, no friends, or loved ones. He has nothing to keep him company but the beauty of nature and the promise of a good meal. He then tells her to send Vernon back to him. While Bella is talking to him, Vernon notices and ends the call. She asks him why he did that. She had no idea that he was dying. Vernon replies by saying Alfie had been dying for the past 10 years now, and that she shouldn't listen to him. He went forward to explain that those are the lines Alfie uses when he gets desperate. Indeed, Alfie is clearly getting desperate. Bella is a little angry but forgets about it and continues to write on her typewriter. The next day, she goes to work. As soon as she enters the library, she sees her boss standing at the door, a board in her hand with the word office written on it with an exclamation mark. She tells her boss she is late because there were problems with the buses that morning. but her boss says the problem is with her and not the buses. While her boss is complaining about her tardiness, telling her it is pathological in nature, Billy walks in on their conversation and asks for a book. Bella gives him directions to it immediately, from her head. Because of that, her boss lets her go. Later in the day, Billy comes to thank her for the directions she gave him and then asks for her name, as he doesn't know what to call her. They exchange names and he leaves. She sees an origami bird that he left on his table, and while she is examining it, Alfie walks up to her and starts talking to her. He tells her to point him to the section that deals with cooking. She tells him the best books he can get. To that, he tells her that the best thing and most helpful thing she could do is give him back his Irishman. While Alfie is raising his voice, Bella's boss comes out and tells him to lower his voice, as it is a library. Stubbornly, he says he won't do that, as Bella doesn't have compassion for the hungry aged man. Bella's boss responds by telling him to get out, or else she is going to call the police. Alfie tells her that it is an excellent idea, since Bella murders plants that keep the planet alive. She threatens him further and he finally leaves. In the next scene, we see Bella in the garden later in the day, struggling with the plants on her own. She is frustrated and screaming. Alfie comes in and tells her that she should stick to writing. She tells him she has 3 weeks left to fix the garden, and he should leave her alone if he is not going to tell her how to do it. He asks her why he should give her advice. She tells him she is trying her best, and if he has a sense of humanity, he won't just stand there and gloat, but instead, he will try to help. Alfie, surprising her, says he will help if she gives him back his cook. She further tells him that Vernon is not a slave, and not hers to give back. If Alfie had treated him like a person, he wouldn't have left. It is at this point that Vernon tells Alfie he would cook his meals, only if he actually helps her fix up the garden. Moreover, he will only cook from Bella's house. Alfie argues at first, but he finally agrees. Soon enough, Vernon brings Alfie food but tells him there's house rules. He can only eat at specific times of the day, and food will be brought to him at the wall, and nowhere else. He will bring the meals and ring the bell twice, so they won't have to see or talk at all. After that, Bella gets a letter from Alfie. There, he leaves her a letter and a gardening book. She spends time reading the book. Vernon tells her Alfie never let the book out of his sight before. She had not finished the book before she got a call from Alfie. He asks her if she had read the book, to which she replies every word of it. He then asks her why she is still talking to him, and tells her to get to work before she gets kicked out. In this scene, we see Bella working in the garden. She is able to remove all the dead parts of the garden. She asks Alfie what comes after, and he tells her that she should dig. He stays with her while she digs and fills a crossword puzzle. He then tells her that if she went through the book, she would know that she is not supposed to leave the roots of the weed in the soil, as it will grow back and strangle her plants. Then he tells her to keep digging but remove the roots. She is finished for the day. She washes her equipment, and because she is drained, she tells Vernon she will be in her bed, while he reads the book on gardening that Alfie had sent. He finds her knocked out on her bed and covers her with a blanket. Their arrangement continues, with Vernon bringing Alfie food at the agreed time, while Bella continues to go to work but still has problems with her boss. While she is working, she keeps meeting Billy, who is still friendly with her. In the next scene, as she works on the garden, Alfie walks in. She tells him that she believed everything he had said, and that Vernon told her he had heard those exact words so many times, and then she tells him that it was shameless of him. He then tells her that it was all true and that she should only doubt a man who changes his story, and that he only kept repeating himself so that one day, someone would hear him. As they speak, rain begins to fall. They begin to actually bond, and he tells her that they're in a country where they take the rain for granted. They see it only as something that ruins a great hairdo and makes taxi drivers rich. Then he gives her sunflower seeds to plant. He later tells her that the book he had given to her was from a friend who would have loved her garden. She should see it as a blank canvas with the opportunity to create something new. He continues teaching her how to create a garden by taking her to his own garden. He then tells her that gardening is a beautiful work of chaos and not calamity. In the next scene, Bella is seen at the lake, feeding some ducks. While she is there, she screams out of frustration of her predicament and Billy stumbles on her. He asks her if she is alright. She tells him she is, she's just letting off some steam. He asks her what she came to do, and she tells him she is there to feed the duck. She shows him a duck she calls Sid, which he proceeds to photograph. It is here he explains to her that his specialty is numbers and moving parts and that he was an aspiring inventor. She tells him she is not very smart, but he disagrees with her, as she knows the name of every book and its author in the library. She then tells him she is also writing a book. It's a children's book, but it doesn't really have a story yet. He gives her a drink from his flask and she tells him she likes his mechanical bird. He is surprised that she even knows about it, so she tells him she saw the drawing on a piece of paper he left in the library. Then he asks her if she would like to see it in person and that he only lived a few minutes away. In the next scene, Billy gives Bella a ride to his workshop. He tells her he inherited the workshop while his brothers got the other things like the cottage. He then shows her the various robots he has been working on. Then he finally shows her the birds which he flies for her. She is fascinated by it and it makes her smile. She makes up a story about the mechanical bird, which Billy calls Luna. The story that is almost identical to hers. She tells him Luna one day meets a wanderer that had wonderful things, and that was the end of the story for now. Billy asks her what happens next. She says she doesn't know and would also like to find out. In the next scene, Bella is on the floor in the garden, and Alfie is kicking her with his feet and trying to tell her to get up, while she complains that the garden is taking too long. Alfie reminds her that everything that matters takes time. Billy and Bella continue getting along. They are seen chatting in the library during Bella's work hours while her boss watches her. In the next scene, we see Alfie being checked by Millie, his doctor. She tells him it looks like his blood pressure is better, and he responds by saying it is because he had been taking all that medicine she has been force-feeding him. Millie hears the bell, and Alfie tells her that it means room service and she should go get the food. After the encounter with Vernon, she asks Alfie to tell her what is going on and he refuses. In the next scene, Alfie is seen in the garden with Bella while she is digging a hole. She tells him she wants to ask him a question, but he tells her he is not interested in her little world and tells her to continue digging. She tells him that she can't, and he asks why not, only to be informed that the hole was done. He tells her to thank him for all his hard work and join him for tea later in the day. He then takes her into his greenhouse later in the day to show her his plants that he had gathered from all over the world. He tells her he spends his day tending to them. In the next scene, Bella is seen staring at Billy while he brings out a hamburger to eat in the library. The boss confronts him and tells him his habit is disgraceful. She drives him out of the library while he tries to offer her his food. She tells Bella she sees what is going on between her and Billy and finds it disgusting. At the end of the day, Bella sees Billy outside the library while she is closing up and tells him that she had some Viking drawings she would have loved to show him. He convinces her to show him even though the library is supposed to be closed. She ends up telling him the story about his mechanical bird Luna that she was working on. After that, he invites her to have tea with him the next day. She agrees and they share a kiss, their first one.
In my dreams, in my sleep, I have him and he has me. We could walk down the street, holding hands, oh so sweet, when love comes my way.
The next day, Vernon arrives at the house to see her sleeping on her desk. He wakes her. She calls him Billy unintentionally and he asks her if Billy is the name of Mr. Wonderful. He wants to know what he does. She tells him he invents mechanical animals and makes her feel like she can fly. She leaves as soon as she is ready and tells him she will see him later. She gets to work late that day and is fired by her boss. She later goes to the tree where she is supposed to meet Billy and waits for him there, even though she had gotten fired. She ends up waiting for him and gets stood up by Billy. On her way home, she sees Billy with another woman, and it seems that he is going on a date with someone else. When she gets home, she refuses to get out of bed and tells Vernon she is not feeling well. When Vernon goes to give Alfie food, he tells him that Bella needs help. He asks what is wrong with her and says she should snap out of it. Vernon goes back and tries to get Bella out of bed using different tricks, but it doesn't work. During the next meal, Alfie asks about Bella again. Vernon tells him she is not doing any better, and Alfie says he wants to have a word with her, it might help. Vernon tells him to be gentle, but when he comes to talk to Bella, he is nothing but gentle. But it gets her out of bed regardless. He brings her a plant and asks Vernon to give them a moment. Then he asks her to ask him any personal question. She asks him if he has even been in love and he tells her about his late love whose name was Rose. He then tells her that she reminded him of Rose, who had a passion for life. She tells him she is stupid for falling for a lie and a cheat and that she thought he actually cared. He then tells her he represented his country in clay pigeon shooting and that he might have to shoot her robot builder for breaking her heart. This makes her laugh. In the next scene, Bella is writing her book before a heavy storm begins. She goes into the rain to save the garden as the heavy storm is tearing the garden apart and destroying her seedlings. She gets something to cover the wild strawberries, but by the next morning, everything had been wrecked, save for the strawberry. When she comes in, Alfie tells her that they should celebrate the little storm. She says there was nothing to celebrate as both the garden and her are ruined. Alfie tells her that he feels that she should have a day off and tells her Millie will go with her. They spend the whole day out and come back at the end of the day. She comes back to a completed garden with Vernon, the twins, and Alfie all dressed up, and a feast of food on the table, all waiting for her. She is pleasantly surprised. He had even made a pond with fishes in them. They all sit down and have a lovely feast and dance together. In the next scene, it is the fabled Monday morning when O'Brien the landlord is supposed to come check the garden. But as he arrives, so does Billy, who has a broken leg and crutches under his arm. He tells Billy that Bella is popular with men and that Vernon is her boyfriend. O'Brien tells Vernon he is impressed by how they had turned around the garden when he finally sees the garden. He tells Vernon that the house value has gone up because of the fixed garden, and that Bella has to pay more to stay there now. Vernon is about to argue with him, but Alfie tells him he would handle it and calls O'Brien over to talk to him. After O'Brien leaves, Vernon and Alfie have a conversation with Billy and tell him that she had thought he was married and had seen him with another woman while he stood her up. He tells them it wasn't him. He had an accident that day and couldn't be there as he had been in the hospital. Then he told them he didn't have her number and had only just got her address from the Adopted Duck Society that same morning. Then he says he didn't know she had a boyfriend, but Vernon tells him that she doesn't. She then screams from outside that he had embarrassed her enough and asks him to leave. He tells her that it must have been his brother George she saw. She says she was sure it was him, but he finally tells her that he and his brothers are a set of triplets. He tells her that he would never lie to her and invites her out with him tonight. He tells her he will come get her and promises not to hit any buses on his way this time. In the next scene, they go to the concert together and have a great time. She then shows him the finished book later that evening. The phone rings and she gets the news that Alfie had finally passed away. They all attend his funeral and find that he had left not only a letter, but his house and her house to her in Vernon, as it had turned out that he owned both houses. The move ends with Bella having a book read. Billy is in attendance, and her book, with the title, This Beautiful Fantastic, is being stocked in the library she used to work at.